Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to episode 59 of Talk4, the quickfire podcast, where we ask four great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me, and our very special guest for today, Holly Baxter, who's going to be answering our questions today. Holly, please say hi to these fine people listening, introduce yourself, and give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do before I shoot some questions.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Yes, my name is Holly Baxter. I am originally from Australia. I have been relocated in the US in Florida for about 6 years now.
Right?
My background is in exercise science and nutrition. And then I've also got a master's degree in dietetics. I guess that's where I've come from an educational standpoint. But I'd say what I do now is predominantly science educating in the online space. I tend to work with not only fitness competitors in the physique sports space, but also a lot of professional athletes. And then all the way at the other end of the spectrum, just people that are just trying to improve their health, improve their body composition, and just feel, and achieve their best self.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really, really powerful work you're doing. And obviously, looking at the website and the social media stuff, it's just fantastic. Really, really impressive to see. And the audio listeners are missing out right now because we do have another special guest who's joined the podcast. So, can we please get the name of your beautiful cat as well, who's just sitting on your lap right there?
So I have actually got my cat. His name is MK. I usually have four cats, but
Oh,
the others are
wow.
around the house at the moment. He's my little buddy. He's hanging out on my lap right now, and he will probably hang out here for the best of the session.
Love it. Well, the YouTube listeners and watchers are in for a super treat there. So it's great to see another guest joining in. But for the main guest, Holly, today, I do have four fantastic questions lined up for you today. So if you're ready to crack on, shall we get on to question number one?
Absolutely, let's do it.
Let's do it. Yeah. Right then. So let's wind the clocks down a bit then. So how did you originally get into and get involved in sport in the fitness industry, and how did it all lead to where you are today?
Yeah, I think where I am now, it's kind of come a full circle, to be honest. I think my initial reason and justification for getting into, nutrition and exercise science was for all the wrong reasons. So I was really sporty growing up, and I think my mom put me into just about every single activity that she could, like for after school sports. And I got to, I guess, college and decided, I need to start making some big decisions about what I'm going to do with my career. And because I grew up in Australia, there wasn't really a whole lot of opportunity to continue pursuing sports at an elite level where there would be any kind of, meaningful career opportunities. So I ended up taking the educational route instead. And I started out in clinical dietetics. So I guess in that role, you're working with a range of different patients from all kinds of backgrounds with all kinds of illness.
Mm,
So just to give you an example, as a dietitian, we can work with renal patients, hepatic liver patients, infectious disease, cardiothoracic, gastroenterology. We work with a host of different clinical conditions and pathologies. But I really struggled having come from this place where I was so motivated to be, my best self and to, achieve at the highest level. I was really competitive, and it really frustrated me, working with a patient group that were not really motivated to be there. In fact, a lot of them, they were referred by their, clinical physician, and they were just kind of showing up to these appointments, or maybe they're in a hospital bed and we just have to tend to them.
mm,
So it wasn't really, I didn't feel anything from that. I wasn't passionate. I wasn't waking up every morning and feeling excited to do my job. And I figured, I'm going to be doing this for a long time. I want to love what I do. So I ended up kind of stepping away from the clinical side and opened my own practice. And that's when I started, working with, the people that were motivated. They were more athletic than not, and they wanted to see, really, positive change. So it wasn't until probably 2 years into my profession, where I was already working with a lot of, athletes and physique competitors, one of my clients at the time said, hey, I know that you do a bunch of sport. Like, why don't you do physique competitions? And I'd never really thought of it. I guess the only motivation, and it seems funny to think back now, but it was completely external. It was an extrinsic motivator, and it was because the World Championships in 2015 were being held in Dubai. And it was a place that I'd always wanted to travel. So I was like, why not blend, my passion with some holiday opportunities? So in efforts to get to World Championships, I had to win a state show, a national show, and then we could compete for Australia and travel to Dubai. So that was really kind of what threw me into the physique sports space. And then I have competed every year aside from 2018, and will compete likely again this year at the World Championships. So that's how I got into the physique sport. But I can't say that I was doing it for the right reasons. In fact, when I was young, I struggled terribly with depression. I unfortunately had a couple of really sad and scary incidences that kind of left me pretty traumatized. And I think, with quite a turbulent, youth, or at least in my teenage years, and not having a good relationship with, my parents or other mentors, I ended up developing an eating disorder, and that stuck with me for about 15 years. So for 10 of those, I completely ignored my psychology. I thought that I should have the physiological, the rigor to actually beat this myself through like exercising it out of me or exercising discipline around my diet. And it was a really tough, and I know for anybody listening, maybe if you have struggled with whether it's a full-blown eating disorder, be it anorexia, binge eating disorder, bulimia, or maybe you just struggle on and off with disordered eating. They are different, distinctly different.
Yeah.
It's still a really hard journey to navigate. It's very consuming. It feels like it takes up a disproportionate amount of your time, and it's exhausting. And I think only very recently in the last 5 years was I able to overcome that and now still be in this space, but feel like I have this ability to do it without something really wrong driving my behavior.
Oh, Holly, honestly, I have to say I really feel for you because I have some friends who they also have eating disorders, and I can tell it's such a horrible thing to go through. But like with most things in life that go wrong and things that are bad, you either let it build you up or you let it tear you down. And it's clear that you've let that build you up, and it's one of these things that's just led you to become this incredible person, become so successful, and spread the message as well. And by the way, I totally get exactly what you mean because I play tennis, and I have to say the travel side of things and kind of using the tournaments and stuff as the way to sort of travel the world. It's the beautiful little wild card that you sneak into the lifestyle. It's a great thing. But actually, a couple of days ago as well, I was just thinking about obviously what you were saying, the clinical side of things and the people you've worked with. A couple of days ago, kind of on the run up to this, I'd seen this program on TV about, I can't remember exactly the name of it. I think it was like Eating You Alive or something. And it talks a lot about the sort of effects of diet and fast food on you. And it kind of really breaks it down good and proper. And there's so many incredible stories about people who've changed their diet, who literally had conditions that the doctors said, you're going to die in 3 months or something. They literally changed their diet and they're alive and they're just thriving. So I mean, diet and stuff is such an important thing, especially in sports, but just for people in general. And it's just so kind of polluted with the wrong things nowadays. But circling back to what you said, obviously about the competition side of things, this does lead really nicely to my second question. So obviously looking at the website, like you said as well, so you've won many bodybuilding competitions and you're still in the game. So I'm curious, what played the biggest part, the biggest role in getting into that winning shape for you then? Was it more because of your training and stuff, or was it genuinely more because of the diet and nutrition side of things? I know you obviously wrote books on that as well. So please do talk about how that came about for you as well.
Yeah, look, I think there's an element of both. I think there's my like background in having, I guess, the cognitive restraint in many situations to, practice discipline, and to push beyond feelings of discomfort. I mean, I think anybody that enrolls in a sport when they're young, I think that has so much advantage and carryover into adult life. So I definitely think that there was an element that I'd been kind of carved into this type of sport because it really requires somebody that is like mentally headstrong. And I really mean that physique sports is not for everybody. It's really hard. I think I was used to pushing myself physically. In fact, I recall when I used to do track sprinting, after training sessions after school, I do recall, and it's probably a little bit gross, but you'd finish the session and like half of you were over on the side rails of the oval throwing up. Like it was really hard. So I think, we were used to pushing ourselves to physical exhaustion, but physique building is not only is it physically difficult, but there's this psychological element that you're trying to endure whilst you're in a calorie deficit. And I don't think that a lot of people have ever really combined those two things. And I mean, there's not very many sports that are performance-based that require you to do your best, but also be starving, essentially. So it's a really interesting, you put those two concepts together, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, but people do it. So I guess to get to world level, competition or like as a physique, I think that the biggest advantage I had was, having an evidence-based approach. There were, and probably only up until the last maybe 5 to 8 years, there wasn't a whole lot of research in, bodybuilders, especially females. So I feel very fortunate to have kind of jumped into that evidence-based space, at that time, and then started, implementing the best practice or the best approaches to getting lean. So when I say that, I'm meaning getting your body fat as low as possible whilst maintaining as much lean body mass as you can. And really, that's the definition of an effective or a successful fat loss phase. You want to capitalize on retention of your muscle and get rid of as much fat as possible. And the benefits of that is it is the driving factor, your lean body mass, that keeps your basal metabolic rate high. So if you're dieting in an extreme way, which we know a lot of people do, unfortunately, there's still a lot of bad information out there. If you're losing weight at a rate that is too quick, and that number tends to be around 1.5% of your body weight per week, that's when we start to see unnecessary amounts of muscle loss or fat-free mass being lost. And that also includes your organs. As you're dieting, if you diet too quickly, we start to see shrinkage of those, the organs in addition to your lean tissue. And that's the most metabolically active tissue we have. So if that's starting to shrink and there's no longer as much energy, required to maintain its function, now your calorie intake goes down. And that's not a fun place to be because you don't get to eat as much food, which is one of the struggles, as you're getting leaner and leaner. So I think the best advantage that I've had would be in being able to apply that science-based approach and knowing how to come out of shows. I think there's a lot of misinformation, or perhaps there's just not enough information, at least not circulating amongst the general public, about what should you do after the diet, because that's unfortunately where a lot of people really stuff up, not intentionally. They just go, okay, great, I've lost the 10, 15 pounds perhaps that I wanted. But then not knowing the consequences of a calorie deficit, we start to see people with lots of metabolic adaptation. Their metabolism has adapted down in a negative direction. And then when they do decide to return to eating at a normal caloric intake, just a normal intake, nothing, crazy, because they've created this interesting, hormonal milieu where we've got hormones that are out of whack, or basically outside the normal clinical reference ranges, and metabolic adaptation, so decreases or slowing down of our function. When we just return to a normal food intake, we start to see unnecessary amounts of body fat regain. And that's why we see people rebound extremely quickly after they've dieted, in a less effective way.
That's a great answer. Thank you, Holly. I'll tell you what. So I'm a huge fitness fan. I love going to the gym. I love kind of these questions and asking these questions to people. And I feel like honestly, my head has been filled with so much confusing information about this. So I'm just going to ask you this, kind of like off the back of me. What you spoke about there was you get to a certain muscle mass and then you start dieting to lose fat, but you want to maintain that muscle mass. So the kind of question I'm thinking about here is there kind of debunk the myth a bit for me then? So can you actually lose fat whilst gaining muscle, or is that just completely false? And some of the kind of programs I've seen around sort of fitness training nowadays from kind of like the online coaches and stuff, they always say to sort of have like do the strength sessions and do the cardio sessions a couple of times a week, but also have like 10,000 steps a day through running and everything and go on this kind of diet. Is that all true? Can you actually gain muscle and lose fat at the same time, or do you have to get to a certain muscle mass and then maintain it while losing the fat? Just give me the reality of it, please. just to clarify it.
I feel like we could probably talk for 30 minutes just on that question. So, what you've just described, at least in, I guess, the research space, is body recompositioning. So, we're simultaneously seeing an individual lose fat mass whilst increasing lean body mass. So, straight up, I will say, yes, you can do that. However, there's a caveat, and that is that only certain individuals are kind of in a group of people that can do that. And that's usually people that are brand new to resistance training. So if somebody's never stepped foot in the gym, or even somebody that might have dabbled in the gym, but they haven't really been following like an evidence-based training program, maybe their training was really like cardiovascular based, it was more like endurance rep-based training, they hadn't really been training to failure, those types of circumstances. Those people, when they are provided with an evidence-based approach training program, they very well can increase their muscle mass whilst losing body fat, just because that stimulus and that signaling is so strong for somebody that's new to training. The other group of individuals that we do see an increase in lean muscle mass and loss of fat mass are people that are carrying a higher percentage of body fat. So, and I'll try to help people visualize what's happening here. So if you've got an individual that has a lot of fat mass, and we compare that to somebody that's already quite lean, as somebody starts exercising and they're doing, a great training program, and the body, in efforts to build that muscle tissue, requires energy. We can't build new tissue without some kind of energy availability, some kind of protein source, of course, and then the stimulus as well, the actual resistance training component itself. So if we've got all those things, of course, we can build muscle. So if we're to look at somebody that's really lean versus somebody that's quite, they have lots of extra adipose tissue, extra fat tissue, that individual has a reserve, we'll call it a caloric cushioning, to start providing that energy towards the act of building new tissue. So it's almost like, we call it repetitioning. We've got energy from fat stores moving in and then building new muscle. So that's the other group of people that can do, body recompositioning well. And in that case, we don't need to put somebody in a really, a high surplus to do it, because they've already got body fat stores that are available to create muscle. A lean individual, on the other hand, it's much, much harder. We do need to put them into a small calorie surplus so that we've got energy available coming in to go towards creating that new muscle tissue, because there's nothing on their body, or at least there's a very small amount to actually fuel that, that progression in muscle hypertrophy. So you can do it, but for the lean individual, or for the individual that has already made quite a bit of progress in their building career, it's basically, if you're trying to do both things at once, I will say it probably takes double the time. So I've got clients right now that have just signed up for a challenge, and they've said to me something really similar. It's like, hey, I don't really want to get too much body fat to, to the point where I'm feeling uncomfortable. Can't I just do both? And I will say, well, if we work at your training for long enough, We keep doing all the right things. You're consistent with your diet. The training's good. You're trying to control or at least manage your lifestyle as best as possible. Yeah, maybe let's think 2 years ahead, you may have accumulated X amount of muscle mass. But what if I told you if you did it this way, where you're in a small surplus and you're not worried about the extra body fat, you could do the same amount of growth in a year. And then, you can see their brains start ticking. They're like, oh, so it's going to take me twice as long. And really, it's a very it's a very vain type of decision that you've got to make, but it's also the reality. People care about their appearance, and that's okay. So as long as people understand that there are consequences and it's time, then I'll work them through that, as long as they are informed prior to making that decision.
That is one hell of an answer. I tell you what, you can tell when you're listening to an expert speaking, because that is just brilliant. I'm gonna have to listen to that at least, I think, at least 4 or 5 times to really let it all sink in. I mean, it sounds to me like people think they're taking a shortcut, but actually, it is the secret long road. So actually,
It is.
it's the opposite effect. Right. So okay. I think that's answered my question pretty damn well. So let's talk about people who are in a bad place with the diet right now, for example, like literally someone who's just getting onboarded, for example. Now I'm guilty of this, so this is kind of a question very slightly tailored to me, but we're not gonna say that. I'm gonna say it's for a friend. Okay, so yeah, asking for a friend. Often I hear people say when they're being told to go on a diet, aka moi, or leave unhealthy foods behind, something along the lines of, I'd rather be happy and eat this stuff because this food keeps me going. I'd rather be more unhealthy than unhappy. Okay. Do you have any tips on how to get out of that kind of a mindset? And how can you actually get the same happiness or satisfaction and the cravings also from the better, healthier alternatives? Is it a slow tapering off process, or is there a way to instantly make it more appealing?
Mm-hmm. I think there's two ways I could answer this. And the first way I want to answer this is the simple way, and that would be, it sounds like for this individual, like if they're being honest, what they're saying, like I'm hearing I'm happy how I am. And I've definitely spoken to a lot of individuals where, like, in the grand scheme of their priorities, let's say they've got family, they're married, they need to manage a marriage or a relationship. They've got financial priorities, they've got business priorities, they've got health priorities. For that person, it sounds like on that, all the things that are important to them and they value, their physical health, it doesn't sound like that is necessarily on their top priorities. Now, should it be? Well, I mean, that's not up for me to decide. So, if someone came to me and said, or if someone was forced upon me and they were like, yeah, you need to work with this person, I'd say, but they're telling me they're really happy. And, we've got to look at health not just from a physiological standpoint, whilst it's obviously very important. And I'm the first person to admit this was me when I was young. Like, my physical health was the number one, but I was neglecting my mental health like no other. And it didn't help me. I think now looking back, I can say that had I focused more on my psychological health, my sense of well-being, my sense of happiness, I'd probably be a happier, more content human. So I think there's a lot of merit to someone's mental health. And if someone's telling you they're feeling really happy, then you kind of have to listen. But to address that question, I think what you're trying to get at is that, okay, if someone wants to start that, transition towards maybe substituting out some of those, unhealthy types of foods towards food choices that are going to be better for their long-term physiological health.
Yeah.
I would say that it is a tapering. You can't go, cold turkey. I just don't think that is the most successful way for most people. Now, I will say I've definitely had some folks and heard people go, that was the only way that I can do it. And, after that absence for a certain amount of time, now I can happily be around those foods and I don't have any issue with them. Now I just eat them, within moderation. But I think trying to find substitutions for the foods that you already love. I don't know that a lot of people instantly change their food choices. I know for me, like over the years, maybe give me a 10-year window, yeah, my food and my palate has changed a little bit. But I know I'm always going to be a sweet tooth, whereas someone else might be. I know I'm a savory guy. I love my crisps. I like burgers. Like that's just not going to change. So that's where I start to just try to find substitutions. So, if someone really enjoys a burger, I would say, okay, well, you know that there's 96% free, fat-free beef. Why don't we make a homemade burger patty? You're literally just going to the store, molding it into a burger bun. Then we're going to get the fat-free cheese. We're going to use the light mayonnaise. Okay, we're not going to go so heavy on all of the the double patties and things. We might change it over to the lean cuts. So there are so many easy substitutions where you can still enjoy the foods that you really like, but we're using a lower calorie alternative, because ultimately the most important thing in efforts to achieve better physical health for most people is losing body fat. And that is only achieved through creating an energy deficit. So calories matter, they really do. So rather than trying to change somebody's entire food choices, they've been somebody that has enjoyed a balanced diet, rather than putting on a keto plan or going to intermittent fasting, but that there's somebody who likes to graze, rather than try to do some fad diet, stick with what you already like, and let's find some substitutions that are just lower calorie value.
Superb answer. Oh God, I tell you what, so many good ideas and thoughts coming from what you're saying just when I'm listening to you. I have to say, I totally agree. The mental health side of things really does play an effect in it. And actually, food is very, very, very common coping mechanism, actually, isn't it? And when you think about it, if people are relying on those things for their happiness and stuff, and then literally they would admit it through saying those words. That's such a common thing to hear from people when they're trying to get on a diet. If you're in a much better place and you're genuinely happy, you wouldn't have as much of a problem with that. Yeah, sure, you'd want to have like you said, you have sweet tooth or something. Of course, treat day every now and then, but you wouldn't be relying on that for that sense of happiness. And in terms of like what you said about the tapering off versus the kind of cold turkey into a diet, I think that's an interesting conundrum, because for me, for example, going to the gym, I've actually found that going 7 days a week has been easier than like 3 days a week and literally just going in cold turkey. But I think it's different for everyone. It's probably more likely that someone especially in something like a diet, I think if someone was tapering off, it would actually be easier, although it does slightly leave the door very slightly open for the cravings to kick back in. But although the cold turkey approach also has a higher chance of failure, whereas also it does have a higher chance of sticking to it. So it's an interesting kind of conundrum, isn't it?
I I think what you're describing is actually the act of, I guess, neuroplasticity of the brain. So, in efforts for somebody to cultivate a new habit, it does take about 60 days. So, I was actually listening to Professor Dr. Carolyn Leaf at a recent conference, and she is a neuropsychologist. And has done a lot of work in the space of mental health, depression.
Mm-hmm.
And she has some fantastic research that basically shows, I guess, somebody's a scan of all of the subjects' brains, and they were all clinically depressed. And then through the act of some cognitive behavioral therapies, and then she has I guess, an approach that they implement with these participants, but it's consistent every single day. And then after day 60, that was about the time that we see complete rewiring of the brain. I'm not sure if you've ever seen like a brain MRI, but essentially we can scan someone's brain, and every thought that we have is representative. It kind of looks like a little tree. But then after that 60-day period of this rewiring, we're changing our internal dialogue, we're changing our thoughts, we're in control of what we are thinking, then you start to see the brain look completely different. So I think how I would kind of associate those two things, I'm not saying it's cause and effect, but some people need to absolutely go ham every single day doing that new behavior in efforts for it to become routine and a habit. So again, that's not always feasible depending on somebody's life. I know for me, if somebody said, you've got to change this behavior and you've got to do it within 60 days. Again, I have to be realistic with my current circumstances. It's like you could need to learn to be a mother in 60 days ago. Here's this child. I'd be like,
Enjoy.
well, I've got like four companies. I can't, like, I just couldn't do it.
Mm.
So we need to be able to find, flexibility along that spectrum for certain people. So I think that's why we see some people that are like, they're all in, they can do it. Whereas other people do need to have a little bit more flux for that behavior to become, a new norm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like you said there, I mean, it just sparks the idea for me as well. So obviously, you get the kind of very generic, general advice on the internet, usually catered to a large mass of people, but that actually people are so individual with what their needs and their approach to things, and that's why you need someone like you, for example, like a personal trainer or someone who can actually help tailor this sort of a thing to you and your needs and everything. And that's where you start to really understand yourself, your needs, and the things that you need to actually commit to something like that, and obviously taper into it, or try and go cold turkey and get the correct motivation for that. So really, it's a very personal and a very individual thing, 100%. So last question now then. So back to the beginners. So for a beginner or a listener who is not in the shape they want to be, so someone who's like at the start of their journey, or like doesn't even know they're at the start of it, but they kind of are because they're thinking about it. So they see the fitness models and they see all the incredible physiques around the internet, and they feel it's almost impossible and it's an overwhelming task ahead of them to achieve this kind of a thing. So what would you tell them to help them make it more manageable and realistic and find the motivation to really start on their fitness journey?
Gosh, there's probably 10 different questions within that question. Okay. For a beginner starting, I think the first thing that you want to do is probably work with a coach, and one that is an evidence-based coach at that.
Mm.
I think if you don't have the knowledge, I think lack of knowledge is usually the biggest issue that we see across the board. Because if you apply some kind of training program, or you try a diet, but it's not actually based upon anything that has evidence to support it, you're instantly putting yourself in a position where you're not going to succeed. Like, this has a high fail rate, or that training program is not tailored to the goal that you are wanting to achieve. So I think getting professional help, honestly, would be my number one recommendation. And then I think beyond that, if somebody isn't able to afford, a professional to step in and help with those things, there are so many, fantastic resources that are available now, whether it's self-help, DIY books, applications, there's coaching apps, training apps, there's platforms all over the internet. But just start off by trying to set yourself, with a realistic, goal, so that you can be accountable to something. So again, it depends on the person, but you've got to be able to look at your current roles and responsibilities. What are your weekly obligations? And I think a lot of people, without really scrutinizing, what they've got on their schedule, they just go out of nowhere, I'm going to commit to 4 days a week of training, and I'm going to, do all this meal prep, I'm going to eat these calories, but they've only got 4.5 hours of the week free, or that they're willing to give up to put towards their goals. So a lot of the time, what I do as a strategy or a tool with clients is time blocking. So I'm straight away looking at somebody's calendar for the week, and we're going through, like, hour by hour. Okay, what do you do in these hours of the day? Okay, and how much of that time do you need to be, or do you want to be, socializing with friends? Because we can't just pretend like they're going to go away. We need to find balance. How many hours are you looking after your child? Where can we fit in some exercise? And we've got to factor in your driving time. And now, if we're going to apply some kind of dietary intervention, what does that require? How much time is that going to take? So let's make sure that we've got it at least put on a calendar, and start with something that's manageable. I think too many people go in way too extreme. And again, I love the enthusiasm, but if we look at, the trends, people that go in too hard, too extreme, they're also the first ones to fall off and then rebound. So I would rather somebody, pick something that's realistic. As far as their training frequency, it might be just 2 times a week, 45 minutes, and commit to that and prove you can do it for a month. And then it might be, okay, we're going to add 30 minutes to that. We're going to go up to an hour or an hour and 15. Do that for another month. Commit and prove that you can build in these habits, and then grow from there. So yeah, number one, get somebody that's expert. Number two, use evidence-based resources and tools, whether it's apps or online platforms, books. And then set something that's extremely realistic based on your lifestyle.
Perfect. Can't add anything to that. That's just spot on. Yeah, it rolls back around to the whole tapering in thing and finding what works for you. But perfect, spot on. Well, Holly, I mean that is our 4 questions for today. But I do want to ask just one more, and be a little bit of a cheeky bugger. So like I said, I love strength training. I've got an absolute expert on the line here, so I feel like I have to ask this little question, just from me, something I've been wondering about from my strength journey. So if I was to work my legs out, for example, do a leg day, do I need my whole body to be resting the next day for it to properly recover? Or if the day after I do arm day, for example, after that leg day, I do arm day, are my legs still getting the proper growth and recovery they need if another part of my body is still hard at work? I guess what I'm kind of asking is, can you get away with day in, day out rotation of working body parts that are different, or is a proper rest day really vital for the recovery?
Look, I think there's a couple of things that are important from a recovery standpoint, and one of them is that that muscle is actually getting physical rest. There's no mechanical tension or stimulus or damage taking place, within that 24 hours. However, I do want to point out that as your muscle adapts, and as it grows, and as it's, I guess, as it starts to be able to handle, for lack of a better word, more volume, you will find that you can tolerate a little bit more. And that's when we've got to think about, what are the principles of hypertrophy? And one of them is obviously increasing volume over time. That's a very important element of hypertrophy. But we've also got to think about training intensity. So as your muscle adapts to the stimulus that you're providing it, over time, you're going to need to continue to challenge it. So you should see an increase in your, I guess, loads over time. But I guess very simply, yes, you can go in the next day and you can train another muscle group and your lower body is getting some rest. Yeah, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that your lower body isn't, helping with stabilization, or they're not, you're still walking and moving. But
Mm.
I would probably consider that more of like an active recovery day for the lower body. And energy availability is also important from a recovery standpoint. We want to make sure that we're getting plenty of nutrient delivery to that tissue. So provided that you're still eating well, you're providing plenty of nutrients, that would be fantastic for recovery.
That's great. That perfectly answers it. Thank you so much. That's great. I'm so happy. I've been wondering about that all the time, thinking, well, if I go in again tomorrow, am I going to be losing all my gains? So that's great. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you. Well, that has in fact been the 4 questions. I say 4, but I mean, let's be real. It's been a bit more than that done for today. And before we wrap this up, it is time for what I love to call the shameless plug. So, Holly, feel free to take a minute and promote anything that you're working on, you want people to take a look at, or just something you believe in. That could be social media, websites, or anything that you're working on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all of my links to my books, to my nutrition coaching app, our training platforms, just about everything is all on my Instagram page. So if you go to Holly T. Baxter on Instagram and or YouTube, you'll be able to find a link that shows you pretty much everything that we've got. I have a coaching team. We've got a new all-female team, which is very much like a holistic approach to health. So yes, we've got the diet and exercise science crew, but we've also got We're approaching this from the psychology standpoint. We've got mindset coaches. We also have physical therapists, chiros. So we definitely have a really good supportive team around me. So yeah, go and check those out.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, guys, we'll have the links all in the descriptions if you're on YouTube, and I think the captions if you're on any of the audio platforms as well. But I mean, listen to that. I mean, this person is just an absolute expert. I mean, definitely go and check it out, 100%. But Holly, just want to say thank you so much for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast. Honestly, an absolute pleasure to have you on. Really, really been a great one for me. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh no, it's been a pleasure. And thank you guys as well for listening. This has been episode 59. And if you'd like to listen into our past episodes, go and have a look at our channel. And if you'd like to listen in for the future ones as well, make sure to hit that subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Signing off for now.